Hello and welcome to In the Cool of the Day. I am your host, Tia Young, and we have a fantastic show for you today. Our special guest is the author of You Can Look, But Don't Touch. One of the things we are going to talk about today is how living single for women in 2016 is very different than living single 20 years ago. Our guest is a single woman and mom, an educator, a coach, and a motivational speaker. Please welcome to the In the Cool of the Day set, Miss KeeBee Smith. KeeBee, hello.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Sure.
Good. Well, listen, before we get into the discussion about the book,
Okay.
you know, back when I was a young woman in the 70s and 80s, we used to say that. We used to say, you can look, but don't touch. And it was kind of a smart, alecky, sassy kind of thing. Never really thought a lot about, you know, what that really means.
Right.
What does that mean in context to your book?
It speaks more to value. A lot of times when I share with women or young girls, I give the analogy that expensive things, valuable things are cased. Never do you go in a store and see the very valuable goods sitting out, because they don't want people randomly touching them. They don't want the chance of them being damaged because they understand its value. Well, that's the same concept in the book. Once you have a real idea as to who you are and whom you belong to, then it changes what you allow. So that's the real message hidden in it.
That's the real message to it, yes. And I know that you are an author. This is your first book.
Yes.
But I'm curious about your encounter, your first encounter with the Lord, and how that, I mean, were you a writer as a young child? Did he speak to you? Is this something new that he told you to do a couple of years ago? What was your experience?
Well, no, I was saved when I was 14. However, I say a lot of times, and I share this even when having conversations with people, I was saved, but I didn't make him Lord over my life until I was in my 20s and 30s.
Wow.
And there's a difference. You know, salvation is unto, I'm not going to hell, but making you Lord over my life means that I no longer do as I want to do. I don't think the way I want to think. I don't say what I want to say, because I'm literally led by you. And that didn't happen until I was in my 20s and 30s. And that was just over time, hearing more of the word, being more exposed to the word. Now, as a young person, however, I knew that there was a call on my life. Now, that I knew at a very young age, but I didn't have all of the pieces. But what was very important to me, I knew it was a requirement for me to live right first. So always at the forefront for me was not the assignment, not the gift, but you can't misrepresent him. Now, that you're not going to do. You're not going to promote the gift and misrepresent him, because your character and your integrity doesn't line up with the word.
Yes. Well, what did you write as a young person? Were you writing stories?
No.
Really?
I didn't.
Isn't that something? That's
No.
interesting.
Right.
Well, let's move into motivation. What motivated you to write the book?
I was clear that it was my assignment to share my experience. I'm very transparent with telling my story, and very often I share that the book is really just an overview of my past into my present and just what that life looked like. And I felt like it was very important for other women to hear the before and after. So often, especially in the body of Christ, I so encounter people talking about their after Christ. You know, they kind of, now since I'm saved, this is my story. Or they even tell the, when I wasn't saved, I used to. Well, that's not my story. I was a mess after salvation. I still lived a life of chaos after being saved. And so I needed for other women to understand what that looks like and how to come out of that. And you don't have to stay in that place. The expectation is still holiness. And that there is a way to get there regardless of what you've experienced or what you've done. As long as there's breath in you, there's another opportunity to walk this thing out right. And so I wanted to kind of put my story out to help someone else to say, wow, let me look at that.
Right. Are you saying that it's like a journey?
It definitely has been.
You're taking that just
Yes.
because you say, Lord, you know, you're the Lord of my life and I give my heart to you, that there's still more work to be done.
Definitely, always.
Yes.
Yeah.
Talk to us about some of the topics in your book. I'd be interested to know that.
I cover the importance of identifying who you are. So often and I know this was the case for myself, I lived the typical life that was kind of prescribed according to the world's view. You know, you graduate. I graduated from private schools. I went on. I got 2 degrees. I married. I had children, and all of this stuff that the world tells you that this is what you're supposed to do. But there was never a period of time where I took inventory of, okay, well, who are you? Why do you think the way you think? Why do you have the insecurities that you have? Why do you doubt certain things? What's your makeup? Because once we're new creatures in Christ, well, okay, who am I now? Because if I'm not that old person, I now have to identify, be stripped of the old and really identify, how is my new mind supposed to work? How am I supposed to talk now? And I didn't know any of that. And so a part of this journey for me was learning, who are you now?
And you mentioned stripped from the old.
Yes.
What does that mean?
For me, it was, I always tell people, it's kind of like buying a new TV, but getting your old remote trying to change the channel, and you don't know why the station isn't turning. If I'm operating from my old mindset in a new place, if I'm using my previous language in a new season, if I respond to conflict or stress or life from that previous lifestyle, because life shapes us. But how life has shaped me is very different than what God expects of me. And so for me, the stripping was what I like to call a social detox. I had to literally, I made a decision to cut everything off. Everything, people and activities and events, and I narrowed my life down to the things that were simply mandatory: work, my children, and really just, okay, God, now we're going to go on a journey. I'm not praying about it. I'm not asking about it. This is something that I'm boldly coming to you saying this is what needs to happen, because I know it's your will that I be whole. I know it's your will that I function in a certain capacity. So I'm going to cut everything else out, and we're going to go on this journey, and you're going to help me to identify who I am in you.
So if I'm hearing correctly, and do correct me if I'm not getting this right, to me it sounds like you didn't depend upon family, you didn't depend upon husband, you didn't depend upon the church. You went one-on-one with the Lord for Him to teach you. Am I hearing that He's the one that taught you how to move from point A to B, or did you have other?
I did.
Okay.
It was a number of things that I did. I did detox myself from a lot. However, it was a number of things that I took advantage of. I constantly had my pastor's voice in my ear. You know, whether it was CD, I didn't limit myself to what I heard on Sunday or what I heard at a Bible study or what I heard at a church meeting. I kept his CDs in my ear while I was in my car. I kept wise counsel around me. I have a very great relationship with my parents, and so I would seek guidance and talk through things with them. I am a big fan of counseling. That's a part of my background. And so I sought out a counselor because I really wanted to examine and dissect why are you like, how did you get here? And because if I'm stripping myself, I need to know the root, because so often we look at the fruit of something, but with fruit, there has to be a root. There's a reason why I was operating the way I was operating, and I knew that I wasn't going to be successful if I just attacked that. I had to get to the root of it. And so I did counseling, I read books, I kept wise counsel around me. So I had a number of things going on to transition me and just kind of walk me through this journey.
Right. Now you mentioned that you had to cut away, you know, you had to literally, like with a knife or a pair of scissors, cut away. What happened when you cut away people? Because I'm thinking some of these people maybe had been friends to you for a very long time.
Right.
What was that process like?
I just did it. I didn't feel like there was any room for explanations. I hear so often people say, I need closure. It's closed when you make a decision. I don't have to have a conversation with you and explain to you why I'm doing what I'm doing. So for me, it was kind of, I'm not going to take, it was an immediate need. I was in an urgent place. God, this is me and you. I don't have time to make 9 million phone calls and explain to everybody why I'm no longer going to be going out or talking, or it's just over. And to some of the people that might have been very close to me, I simply said, my life is going to be different now, and I've got to go away.
Right.
You know, but not with a lot of explanation. And so it was a very easy cut for me.
Okay, and then they accepted that?
They did.
Okay, and then were you ever able to rekindle any of those relationships because maybe those people changed too? Or not?
Well, oddly enough, I wasn't even really looking for any rekindling.
Oh,
you know,
okay.
After years had gone by, periodically I would speak to people or they would check on me, but I wasn't necessarily looking to go back. I was so focused on moving forward and just kind of identifying who I was and getting a better understanding of who God was, that none of that mattered to me.
Right. Well, in the introduction, I mentioned how you know, you were going to share with us a little bit about the different journey that a single woman walks today as compared to, say, 20, 30 years ago.
Right.
Can you begin to talk about that? I know we may have to stop for a break, but if we do, we'll come back and you can pick that up.
I think the journey is the same. I think the core is what's different. Because the same things, we're not seeing new things, I believe, in terms of the behaviors or the outcomes. You know, people were shacking 20 years ago. People were having sex out of wedlock 20, 30, 50 years ago. So the behaviors and the outcomes, I think, aren't different. I think what's at the core of people, there were different values then. Now, it's not major for a woman to just decide I'm gonna live with a man. It's not as major when I look for women to say, oh, I'm just gonna find somebody and we're gonna have a baby, and you know, it's 3, 4 babies by 3, 4 different. The value, I think what's at the core has changed so much. Yeah, and so that's a part of, I guess, where I fit in. I tell, and I had this conversation earlier, I got an opportunity to speak to some girls. I share that I am what I consider the anomaly. I deviate from the standard. I'm okay with being the uncommon. I'm not going to do life according to the world standard because I believe that someone has to show the world something different, and I'm okay with being that difference.
Right, and you have not had, you mentioned that you're speaking to other young women. So is this in group sessions or is it one-on-one counseling?
I do both.
You do both?
I do speaking engagements to teens. I go to high schools, middle schools. I do group sessions. I do individual sessions. I do sessions with previously incarcerated teens. Wow. So just wherever there is the need and it's my lane, that's typically where I am.
Where you are. Well, we're going to take a short station break right about now, and we will return after these important messages. We'll be right back. Thank you for joining us on In the Cool of the Day. Our special guest is Ms. KeeBee Smith, author of You Can Look, But Don't Touch. KeeBee, prior to the break, you were talking a little bit about some of the women that you have counseled in the past. I'm not a counselor, but I have talked to a lot of women that are in that 18 to 40-year-old age group. And some of them have really had some really tough times. They're doing all they can do just to stand. And then there are others that, and it's through no fault of their own, you know, it just seems like they're just having a bad time. But then there are others that have ignored all of the wise counsel that they have gotten, and they've chosen to go a certain way. And when bad things happen, they are angry and mean, and they're blaming everybody under the sun instead of taking responsibility. What do you say about that? I'm an older woman, and I'm looking at it maybe a little different than you would look at it. I'd be interested to know.
I can relate because I would say that I was that woman at one point. From the perspective that on paper, my public life presented very well. You know, responsible and home and car, and she works and has benefits and she travels, but my private life was a mess. And I too had people giving me counsel and telling me this isn't the way and this is the way. But I think the big picture is that level of maturity, both naturally and spiritually, because there's a difference in hearing and listening. And I always say revelation isn't revelation until there's some application. You can't tell me that you really have it or that I got it this this time if I don't see you applying it? No, you're still storing it as information. It's head knowledge. And so a lot of times I believe once we sow a seed and you give a person information, you're kind of looking for immediate results. Until that thing clicks for them and they make a decision, because I'm a believer, decision is everything. That's the driving force. Once we make a decision, then it's on then, whatever it is we're attempting to do. So I was in that place where I was storing information, going to church, storing it, hearing people, but I wasn't living any of it. And it wasn't until I started looking at the quality of my life. Despite the public facade, you know what this internal battle is. Once I got tired of that and I really accepted, God has more for you. You know that you're not supposed to be living like this. You know you have to set a better example for your children, and that there are people assigned to you because you know there's a call on your life. It was at that point that I threw my hands up and I said, enough is enough. I'm now going to pull what was already in me, because like I said, those seeds were sown, and I started kind of feasting on all of what was in me prior and then looking for more and applying it.
So would you say that it's not a bad thing to share information when you see that maybe someone is going in the wrong direction because they're storing it, and at some point in life they'll pull from that storage and take some of that advice? Or do you think it's better just not to say anything?
No, I definitely do. I think that kind of goes in line with, like with children, train up a child in the way he should go, so that when he's old, he won't depart from it. That scripture clearly says, so when he's old, which means there's a middle portion, right? Because the scripture started with, while they're a child. So it's literally it's no different than with an agricultural system. If I plant today, my corn isn't going to be up tomorrow. Right. But I think as people, we sometimes get so discouraged because we can feel like, I keep having that same conversation with her. Mm-hmm. It's like she's not getting it. Not our responsibility to determine when she gets it. Our responsibility is to be willing to continue to pour. Because I think about all the people that have had conversations with me. If they would have stopped, would I be here now? Would I be able to now pour into the lives of other young people or women? So I think we should constantly, if that's our assignment, to constantly pour.
And what we need to do is patience. I'm thinking of, in the Bible, it talks about patience. And sometimes people think patience is okay, I tell you this now, and in 3 minutes, right, you've received it. And sometimes it takes years before, From your book, what is it that you want women to get from that book?
I think the big picture, because it talks a lot about how to have healthy relationships with the opposite sex. It talks a lot about my views in relationship to dating, to abstinence, to holiness. But one of the big things that for me is bigger than all of that is to really come to grips with who you are. Because once you identify who you are, everything else is birthed out of that. See, the decisions I made in reference to how I was going to socialize, how I'm going to think, how I'm going to talk, how I'm going to act, that's actually birthed out of how I see myself now. It's not just I targeted in on this one area and said, oh no, I'm going to remain abstinent. I now have a different lens. I see differently in relationship to who God created me to be. I understand what I bring to the table. And so as a result, I'm not going to taint that with the world's concept of how you do things. So I think that's the big picture. To make the investment, we make investments so often in our children and in our careers and all of this other stuff.
That's true.
But at some point, we've got to be able to pause and say, wait a minute, this stuff is good, blessings. Those are indeed blessings. But am I investing in my personal development? Am I growing naturally and spiritually? Do I really know who I am? Because we can look at the decisions that we're making, the choices that we're making, how we think, and say, that's how I feel about myself. It's a direct reflection of how we feel. So that would be the biggest piece for me, coming to grips with really embracing our true value.
Right. You brought up the word relationships with the opposite sex. Do you think that you can even have a good relationship without knowing who you are?
Not at all.
And how do you know that? How do you find out who you are if you're already in a relationship?
Right, and that's good. I don't believe that it's possible, and that was one of the reasons why I did that social detox and cut everybody off, because I was clear I can't give something that I don't have. I can't give loyalty if I'm not loyal to myself. I can't love you if I don't really love myself. And so often you hear women throw it out, oh, I love me. If we look at the lifestyle, if I look at your actions, if I look at how you think, that's a direct correlation to how you feel about yourself. And so for me, that was that big piece of cut everything off and let me spend time with me. I started doing things like examining my thoughts. In situations, I became highly sensitive and aware. So even in conversations, I would examine, why did you think that? Why did you respond like that? Why did that cause you to have feelings? That, you know, what was that feeling? Was that really insecurity, or were you angry? You know, what is that real thing? Because if we take time to really examine and learn ourselves, and if we're willing to be honest with ourselves, God will reveal so much to us. And the awesome part is he'll then work us through it into the place that we should be. But it requires, and I say all the time, some people want to do a weekend retreat, or I went away with the church for the weekend and I'm fixed. That's not how life works. Yeah. You know, for me, I had 30 years of this. It wasn't going to go away in a weekend at the mountains. I had to literally make a decision that everything else is going to be on the back burner, and God, it's going to be me and you.
You went through a series of, I would say, self-assessment of yourself. Is that painful?
Yes, very. I spent a lot of time crying, a lot of times confused, a lot of time. And I think that's another reason why people don't want to do it. I remember a pastor saying before that you've got to press into a pinch, because if you're ever pinched and you pull from it, it hurts more. And so I was clear that, okay, you're going into this and you're asking God for this, but be clear, it's not going to always be easy. It's not going to always be easy now being alone, having to look at yourself, having counseling sessions where a counselor, in a sense, puts a mirror in front of you and takes you back to your past, and you have to deal with life, portions of life that you've never touched. And so it is, but it's so worth it, because what's on the other side is that freedom, that liberty, where you now know, and you know who you are, and you're able to move out of that place and no longer live in that bondage.
Right, right. KeeBee, can you talk about some of the, and you've gone over some during this session, but can you talk a little bit more about some of the obstacles that that women run into that cause them to be so frustrated and cause them to be so angry? I think our viewers, that would help if you could hit on some specifics.
I know when I talk to a lot of women, surprisingly enough, especially when we have women's group, one of their biggest complaints is always not being in a relationship, or not being able to find a good man, or I want to be married, or it's never, I very rarely hear career. I very rarely hear finances or the relationships that they might have with family or friends. It's always at the surface, a man.
Why do women think that they cannot survive or move in a different way without that type of relationship?
Right.
Not that it's wrong,
right,
but why does it, it seems to accelerate anything else?
Because what I've come to understand is, if you're not whole, you're looking for someone to fill the empty spaces. And those are technically the spaces that God is supposed to fill. But if I'm not growing in my relationship with God, and I've not allowed him to fill those spaces, I'm now searching. And so if I've got a career, okay, I've got something in that space. I might have children, I have something in that space. I'm able to travel and make money. So people are looking for space fillers. And it seems like that male interaction is one that's big. And I tell women all the time, if you don't come to the table whole and complete, you'll be a leech to a man. Because what you're going to do is you're going to turn him into your God, and you're going to expect him to do things that he's not supposed to do. You want him to be your validation. You want him to be your entertainment. He's no longer just a complement to your life. He's your life. And so I hear a lot of times men say, oh, I met this really great woman, but then all of a sudden she wanted to be with me every weekend. She was calling me nonstop. My next question would be, does she have hobbies? Does she have friends? When you really look at a lot of times, especially women in their 30s and 40s, they do work, they do church, they do children. They don't have hobbies, they have very few friends, they have very limited interaction. They spend their social time at home. And so there is a lack of balance. So when they do meet somebody, I'm now on you. And so fill this spot for me, because this isn't, and that's why I tell women, in yourself, in your singleness, live. The Bible says that I came that you might have life and have it more abundantly. Not I came that you would just have a husband. Not I came that you would just have kids. Life. The totality of life includes so many things, but people are just limiting it to certain areas. And so I share just that. Take a class. Find out what you like. Hang out with friends. Travel, so that as you meet people, you're not looking for them to fill spaces. You're just able to enjoy who they are.
So you need a life without depending upon someone else to make you happy.
Yes.
Because that's not going to happen.
Yes. Happiness is an inside job.
It is.
Yeah, you've got to bring it to the table, because if not, you're looking for someone to bring it to you.
Right. We have just a little bit more time, but I would want you to just share your heart with women who may be at that breaking point, that they don't know what their next step is going to be. Some may be married in marital situations, some may not be.
Right.
What would you tell them?
And I think that's good, because I tell women a lot of times, even though my book is for single women, it touches every woman, because I've been single, I've been separated, I've been married, I've been divorced, I'm single again. I've covered every area. So as a result, I have experience in every area. And my chaos and not knowing who I was didn't start towards the end. I didn't know who I was as a married person. So it is important, regardless of what stage you're in, whether you're married right now, it's still necessary to identify who you are. You're not just wife. You know, you're not just mom.
Yes.
You've still got to be able to say, who am I? That's got to be important. You've got to at some point identify who you are. And there's no better way to go through that journey than with God, because I use this example in the book. If any appliance that I have breaks, I contact the manufacturer for repair to find out what's the problem and what do I need to do. I'm not going to take it to another place who doesn't deal with that particular appliance, because they know exactly how it's made, and that's how our relationship is with God.
So who am I? I think that's a key of what we talked about today. KeeBee, I want to thank you so much. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming in. We hope that you'll come back and visit with us again.
Thank you.
We hope that you have enjoyed our show today with Miss KeeBee Smith. I believe that her book, You Can Look But Don't Touch, is a real life game changer for single women. Truth be told, the book has a few great tips for us older women who are single and us married girls as well. We look forward to joining you next week on In the Cool of the Day. Bye-bye.